27-17 victory. Give us your initial thoughts.
Well, my initial thought, Corey, I'm so happy for the coaching staff and the players because maybe most important, it validates our plan. That's our plan of how we play football. On defense, we keep the ball in front of us. We don't give up big plays. We're always reacting to the ball when it's thrown. Our defensive linemen do a great job of getting their hands up. Here's Joe Evans causing another interception with a tip pass. And, of course, Wagner, I believe, had two tip passes. So those things all start to add up. Plus 4 on turnovers, of course, all but guarantees a win. And it was nice that we could take such advantage of the turnover situation in their own stadium.
We have a lot to untangle on this show, Don, and I'm sure fans, we've got a ton of comments flooding in here, so I want to get to those. But before we do, last week I used the word elite to describe the secondary, and maybe that was, again, reacting to the moment and overreacting to the moment, frankly. But now we've had two more. We've had another game. We've had 2 games total against 2 very good opponents. And I'm thinking maybe I wasn't overreacting. Don, is it too soon to say that this secondary has a chance to be really, really good?
Yes, I do think they have that opportunity. And the DBs would tell you it all starts with the pass rush. It all starts with the underneath coverage. Linebackers have to do a good job in zone coverage of fence posting those receivers that are deeper down the field, defending those seams from underneath. And our guys, of course, have all that understanding that they need to be able to get that done. Just a complete win in every way. The thing I appreciate also, once again, we clearly won in the kicking game. As we talked about last week, that's a game within itself. And you'd have to say our defense won versus their offense. You might argue that our offense did not win versus their defense, but we clearly won in the kicking game again. And at the very least, that's 2 out of 3.
And Torrey Taylor looks, we talked preseason, Don, you and I talked about, would he be able to figure out how to punt a traditional style? He seems to have figured it out. We've had a big sample size because this offense hasn't always looked great these first 2 weeks. And I don't remember a bad punt from Torrey.
No, he's got just such an incredibly strong leg. It's not that he has to hit the ball perfectly for it to go a long way. He might go end over end even, and it still might go 50 yards. And, of course, you know how wind resistance works. The efficient way to get the ball way down the field is to spin the ball off your foot. But he's proven he didn't even have to do that. He's got a lot of what we used to call farm strong, right? He's just got a lot of natural strength in his leg.
As far as Caleb Shudak is concerned, because I want to bring this up because you brought up the kicking game. I'm really proud of Caleb because that first kick from whatever it was, like 50 yards, I don't know what happened on the snap. I thought it was a decent hold, but was it out? Almost the people friends we were watching the game with thought that the holder maybe didn't get it in the right spot on the ground. Did you see anything on that? Or
it was a great effort on the part of the holder just to fill the snap. That's how high the ball was. He came off the ground to field it. He got it back down on the ground, and at that point, of course, it's not hard to imagine that you might have an errant kick. So it certainly wasn't the holder's fault. It certainly wasn't the kicker's fault. It was all on the snapper. And then later, of course, he knocked one through with his usual consistency. His PATs. I used to always tell our kickers, there's an expression that relates to what you're doing. People always talk about splitting the uprights. So every time you line up for a PAT, if it's not right down the middle, then you need to be asking yourself, why not? Because, of course, you still might have it within the uprights on a PAT, but that's because you're 20 yards away from the uprights. Try being 50 yards away. Now your margin for error is not nearly as high. So it's critical that you split the uprights on all those PATs. That should give you confidence that you can make them from way out on the field.
Okay, let's get to some of these comments because I don't want to get too far behind in the chat. Let's move down to, we ran through some before you jumped on here. Hawkeye Howard says the O-line is getting better every week. We've only seen 2 games. I saw a marked improvement. They're still waiting for Kyler Schott to come back. What did you see from the offensive line?
I still have concerns about our running game. We didn't run with any kind of consistency. I think the smartest thing that Brian did, there were a lot of good things that Brian did as a play caller. One of the smartest, we decided to start throwing the ball on early downs, and that gave us less pressure from the pass rush because it wasn't an obvious passing situation. We went to more short and intermediate routes. We had a much higher completion percentage. Of course, I'm talking really second and third quarters when I say all this. But the disappointment was we still didn't run the ball with great consistency, and that's a concern going forward. And we also did struggle. The second concern I had mentioned was pass protection, and part of that's on Spencer also. Spencer needs to understand what field goal range means. Now we still hit the 50. What was it? How long was the last one? 50 yards?
One, I believe.
51. Whatever the case, it was a long field goal. But let's face it, you don't take sacks when you're on the plus 25-yard line. Third and long, you can step up in the pocket and you might get sacked, but that's -2, -3. When you try to bail out of the backside of the pocket, now it turns into -12. And now you've got a problem because you might not be in field goal range anymore. Even if you're in field goal range, the percentages have gone down on that kicker being able to drive the ball through the uprights, because the angles are changing with every yard you back up, the angles change a little bit.
Yeah, and I noticed that was one of the things I had written down, just awareness of where you are on the field. And Spencer's had this habit, in my opinion, from what I've seen year 1 to year 2. He makes interesting decisions, not always good decisions, not usually decisions that lead into interceptions, at least. I'm thinking back to the first 2 games, obviously kind of turnover plague, but even past that, moving on throughout last season, just interesting decisions that didn't result in turnovers. But again, taking sacks when you're just on fringe field goal range. He did that, 3 or 4 times today, Don? You would think at some point, wouldn't you, that Brian and Kirk takes him aside and says, look, whatever you do, you cannot take a sack there.
Well, based on the way he reacted in those situations, you wonder if it maybe wasn't addressed on the sideline. It's kind of hard for me to believe that it wasn't mentioned when he came off the field. Hey, you got to have an awareness, Spencer. We're in field goal range unless you take us out of field goal range. So please understand, we don't want you to try to bail out of the back of the pocket. You know what I mean when I say bail out of the back.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have if he was quicker and he could break contain and buy all kinds of time, that's different. But he's not quite quick enough to be able to escape that edge rusher. And the only thing to do at that point is step up in the pocket. You might be able to slide left or right based on the penetration of the interior lineman. And at the very least, you're tackled for a short loss.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about Spencer's struggles still, but let's give him credit for what he did do. Charles Pinster says Spence made some NFL throws out there. I made the same comment on at least the throw to Charlie Jones. Jared says the same thing. That one to Charlie Jones was a dot. I mean, that was a pretty nice throw, wasn't it, Don?
Well, the thing that stuck in my mind, nobody could rave about Spencer's play in the first quarter. And that wasn't surprising at all. It's the first time he's been in front of a hostile crowd. He's a little bit anxious. I think we had a lot of players on both teams that were a little bit anxious early on. Both teams were messing up here and there, and nobody really got any traction in that first quarter. But in the second quarter, and I give Brian credit for turning more to short and intermediate passes on early downs. Yes. I think it made all the difference. We weren't running very well on first down anyway, and Brian thought logically, or maybe it came from Kirk, we don't know, but somebody had the correct assessment. Let's think about throwing the ball more on early downs, because let's face it, Spencer seems to throw better when it's not third and long, and that's true for all kinds of quarterbacks. But the thing that impressed me so much is he stepped up in that second quarter when the game was very much in doubt and made all kinds of good throws. And our receivers, in particular, Charlie Jones and Sam Laporta, those guys came through with some big-time catches too. Lachey had a nice catch as well, as I recall, in that second quarter. So that was all good to see. But my concern really offensively is, can we run the ball with better consistency? We're not really knocking people off the ball like we might. Here's another good wrinkle. There are several good wrinkles that came to play. Here's one I liked. How about being in the shotgun with your fullback back there in the backfield with you, and then letting him carry the ball? Nobody on Iowa State's side of the field expected that to happen. I didn't expect it to happen either. But we had 1st and goal at the 9, and our fullback gains 5 yards on first down. That's a home run. 5 yards on first down from the 9. I used to sometimes say that's the worst place on the field to be involved with red zone offense is 1st and goal at the 9, because that is a hard 9 yards, or even worse, 9.5 if you're barely inside the 10. But that was good to see that we had some wrinkles there. They gave us a good wrinkle as well. You remember a couple of snaps where they snapped the ball to the running back, not to the quarterback. They then carried out a fake to the quarterback, and logically now, instead of the quarterback keeping the ball after he fakes to the back, it's the back keeping the ball after he fakes to the quarterback. You got a better runner coming around the other side, and they did it twice, and I think it was effective both times. But here's another good call, and this is the kind of thing I appreciate as an old play caller. We had 3rd down and 6 in the 4th quarter, and Brian made a great call. I don't know if you remember it, but here's what made it a great call. It was a call based on the game situation we were in. He ran a double cut on 3rd and 6. That is a great call because, let's face it, they might be motivated to try to get a pick 6. So would it be hard to imagine that corner might jump that short, what appeared to be a short route? No, we didn't hit the double cut. They still played it. But the point is, it's a safe play because it's either open downfield or it's covered. And at that point, if we have to, we can just throw it off the field even. But the point is that throw is not going to go the other direction. And it's the perfect time to throw the double cut when you expect them to attack what appears to be a simple out route.
We agree with Paul on this comment. Let's move down the list here. There's a couple comments that I wanted to get to. Charles says, I think Campbell was trying to keep Purdy's mental game. The linebackers were really good. I'm not quite sure what Charles means by that, but the linebackers were very good. I have written down in all capital letters, Don, Justin Jacobs.
Absolutely.
I mean, what a game.
Talk about a huge play. You know, he was blocked. He fought off the block. I'm talking about when they were coming off the goal line. And he obviously got to the ball. Hall has good ball security. He's not a fumbler. But
No.
If the ball gets hit with any kind of strong force on the part of a defender, then the ball may pop out, and it did. And of course, Campbell was right there to take advantage of that opportunity, and nothing better than a defensive score. As we've discussed, that percentage of win, if you have a defensive score, is awfully high. And thanks to Iowa, we're pushing that percentage even higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Justin Jacobs, the forced fumble, you alluded to that. The scoop and score by Jack Campbell, the interception by Seth Benson. This is a really good linebacking unit, it seems like, right now. And, you know, Iowa likes to play a lot of cash with Dane Belton, but I have a hard time seeing how you can keep Justin off the field.
Yeah, they're both good solutions based on personnel. Here's another guy I want to call out because I don't think we talked about it last week, but I did have a chance when I was over at practice on Wednesday. I had a chance to get Joe Evans' attention, and I said, Joe, congratulations to you because you caused an interception last week. And I don't know if you remember the play or not, Corey, but it was a pass rush situation. He got kind of hung up inside. The quarterback went wide. Of course, it's not your normal quarterback. It's Penix. And Joe gave a great effort to sack that quarterback, and that's precisely why the quarterback threw the ball, is because Evans was going to get him. And today, lo and behold, it's another great effort by Joe Evans. This time the ball simply gets tipped up in the air. And, of course, I believe it was Hankins that was waiting on it. It was one of Hankins' 2 interceptions. So just outstanding effort gets rewarded right and left. And the thing I like about it, again, these are the same preachings and teachings that the coaches have been given to the players. So the beauty of a day like today, Corey, it validates all that teaching that our coaches have been doing. And it confirms with the players, these coaches know what they're talking about. If we continue to listen to them, how good can we be? It's easy to be excited about what might happen over these next few weeks.
Certainly is. I do have the box. Do you have the box score yet, Don? I can get you the box score.
I do.
You do have it. I want to pull that up here. Let me filter through the comments while that's loading. Paul says, if Spencer grows up, we could run the season, period. I don't know if he means run the table. Obviously, that's a little bit that's a little bit overeager, but the schedule
We
is
refer to that as counting your chickens before they've hatched.
right. The
One at a
schedule,
time, please.
as fans, we can do that, Don. I know you're a coach through and through, but the schedule shapes up pretty well. I'm not saying that this is going to be accurate prediction, but if I agree, if Spencer can continue to improve, the schedule is very workable, right, Don?
It is. It is only if we subscribe to that idea of playing them all one at a time. This much we know about football. If you're not right mentally, then you can lose to any number of opponents. On the other hand, if you're right and they're not right, then you're just about guaranteed to win the game. So we just have to be sure that we just approach them one at a time. Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves.
Absolutely. Eventtide says, can you imagine this team with this defense when the quarterback is on his game? Well, we saw it for at least for a drive, Don. You mentioned the catch by Lachey. We talked about the catch by Charlie Jones. It seemed like, and I'm not saying it kind of went in the second half. I think situationally things changed. But in that second quarter, again, this is my perspective. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It just felt like something clicked for Spencer at that before that drive, that touchdown to Charlie Jones.
Sometimes it might be as simple. I think one of those early completions, I believe, was the ball to Lachey. I guess I can't recall exactly in what order those throws were made, but my recall is that maybe Lachey was one of those early catches in the second quarter. And the beauty of that particular play, the ball was thrown high, the ball was thrown slightly behind him, and he still made the catch. It was a better catch than it was a throw. But right. I know this from coaching quarterbacks. When your receivers make plays for you to take you off the hook, so to speak, because you didn't make a great throw, that really boosts the quarterback's confidence in the receivers that he has. And of course, it gives him a chance to realize, it was completed, but I could have made a better throw. I could have thrown the ball a little bit wider, not quite so high, because as we know, tip passes end up in the wrong hands so much of the time. But Lachey made a nice play on it. And from that point forward, we made any number of catches, a lot of which were routine plays. But in the first quarter, you saw him throwing the ball with too much pace at times, maybe rushing his throw. We had a naked there in the second half. I believe it might have been fourth quarter even, where he rushed his throw. The announcer, even, I think Herbstreit even commented, if he hadn't rushed his throw, he rushed it and threw it high to the outside receiver. But the backside tight end on the over route was the one that was opening up. If Spencer would have just given it a little more time, nothing wrong with throwing to the outside receiver, it'd be a lesser gain, but just make a good, accurate throw. I believe that was a critical down, as I recall. I think it was the 3rd and 6 maybe, and we overthrew it and we had to punt.
And that drive, that touchdown drive with Spencer and of course Charlie Jones, you mentioned Lachey. Seemed like that was also when Brian really started to give him credit. He did start to make giving Spencer easier throws to make. And he also really made a concerted effort, to me, it seemed like, making a concerted effort to get Tyler Goodson the ball in open field. And even though the lanes weren't always there running the football up the middle, it seemed like when you got Tyler, obviously when you get Tyler in open field, good things happen.
Yeah, there's some truth to what you say. One mystery I still have, there have to be plays that are designed to get number 3 open, except, and I don't doubt for a second that some of those plays were called in the game and it simply didn't work out the way we hoped. But if I have one disappointment in terms of personnel through 2 games, it's that Tyrone Tracy hadn't had more touches. Yeah. And I'm sure, of course, the staff's going to be more than aware of that after they look at the game tape too. And going forward, I'm sure they're going to make an effort to get him more involved in the offense than what he was in game 1, game 2.
Absolutely. Let's get down the list here. I know you're probably not into polls this early in the season. Paul says number Matt Hankins played a near perfect game today. It was Riley Moss's week last week, Don, and it was Matt Hankins' week today. These corners are they're showing out right now.
Well, the one thing that was obvious to me on that first interception, Matt Hankins is fortunate because he could have been flagged for holding. You know, he grabbed the receiver as the receiver went by him. He's smart enough. He's an experienced player. He grabbed him, but he didn't just maintain that grab for a long period of time. He grabbed him enough to slow him down, and then he was able to catch up. And, of course, the ball was a little bit underthrown. And I give our DBs all credit for having good hands. Hankins went up and did a nice job of high pointing the ball. He looked like a receiver more so than a defender at that point in time. All of our DBs would take offense to that because they would ask me the question, who says a defensive back can't catch the ball as well as a receiver? And they're right. We have some DBs that do have wide receiver hands. And that's one reason we end up with so many picks.
Don, I'm having an internet issue here, so I'm going to set you up with a question, and then I'll let you answer that, and I'm going to just excuse myself just for a second to try to fix this issue.
Sure.
So one thing I had written down is again, these are just some of my notes. We talked about Justin Jacobs. Stretch play selection. I don't know why I had this written down, but it seems like at times Iowa picks interesting times. Brian picks interesting times to run the ball out wide with a stretch play. I believe in the first half there was a 2nd and 10, and he called a stretch, and it lost 3 yards, and now you're stuck with a 3rd and really long. What's your theory as far as types of running plays? I mean, you were an offensive coordinator. What's your mindset as far as what types of runs to play at what yardage length, and of course what down?
Well, that's difficult to say because what you factor into that are the individual matchups that you have out at the point of attack. You know, if you have an All-American tight end and they have an outside linebacker that's inexperienced or doesn't have the same ability of your edge blocker, then that's all the more reason to run a stretch play in that direction. Of course, we have and our center is a good example. You know, he does a great job of reaching to the call side. If we're going to run an outside zone, you can bet that he's going to do a good job of cutting off that inside that first down lineman to the side of the play. It doesn't really matter if he's lined up over the guard or not. Linderbaum is so athletic, he can still get in position to cut that guy off. And the bottom line, of course, all those guys are moving their hats in the same direction and straining their hips in that same direction. And with a little bit of luck, there's no penetration on the part of any defender. And at the very least, there's always a seam for a good running back to find that sliver of daylight that they need to be able to spurt through that hole and work their way downfield.
Okay. We're happy we got time to talk about good things, but it seemed to me that Iowa maybe put in some of their backups a little bit too soon. But again, we said last week that they waited too long to put in their backups. So which is it, Donna? Are we just looking in hindsight too much?
You're talking about that last drive that Iowa State had where they
just made me a little bit more nervous than I would have preferred.
Yeah, I don't know exactly who was in the game at that point in time. I thought it was a mix of defensive starters and backups. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was mostly backups at that point in time. I do know this, and maybe it's worth talking about. I was a little surprised that number 15 left the game for them with that much time on the clock. Honestly, the impression I had as an old quarterback coach, it was almost as if Coach Campbell wanted to blame Purdy for the offensive problems, and they weren't nearly all on Purdy. The tip pass, of course, was not his fault that it was tipped. And, of course, the interception that was a scoop and score, that wasn't his fault either. So I just wondered why he pulled him so early. I understand getting him out. I think we were ahead by 17 at the time. Yeah. And at that point in the game, it was kind of hard to imagine that we weren't going to win the game. But you never know. You know, there's still a lot of time on the clock. But I was surprised that they pulled him right then. They put in the backup, and I don't doubt that the backup's worthy of playing time and needs playing time, just as our guy does. But I was just surprised that they didn't give him a chance. As I recall, maybe the two previous possessions had gone south on him. Maybe both of them were turnovers, but maybe neither one of them was Purdy's fault. So I thought at least they'd give him one more series. Hopefully that would produce points, and then they'd get him out of the game. but it didn't work out that way. Of course, the thing we don't know is exactly what kind of mental state Purdy was in when he came to the bench. Maybe there was some rationale for doing it. I would imagine Coach Campbell's going to be asked why he pulls Purdy at that point in the game, and I'm sure he'll have a good reason for what he did. And it's kind of hard for us to really know what might be going on their bench at that point in time.
Did it seem like to you, Don, and I could just be a biased fan, did it seem like to you there were a lot of missed holding calls against Iowa State?
I do remember there were times for sure when their linemen were holding us. Now, you realize that was a Big Ten crew. That's the way that series works. When we play over there, it's a Big Ten crew.
That topic came up, and I did not realize.
Yeah. And when they play here, then it's a Big 12 crew. That's the agreement that both sides have. So I don't know. I don't know how the penalty shook out in the end. But
do you hear?
I thought there was some holding going on both sides, to be honest with you. That number 9 for them, wasn't it his number, the edge guy that's so good? Our tackles have trouble with him, of course,
right?
Because he is a difficult guy to block off the edge. He's a little bit like a fresh Joe Evans. He's quicker than the average defensive end, and it's a mismatch problem for any offensive tackle, especially when the guy gets a really wide alignment and just flies up the field. That's difficult for any offensive tackle to handle.
Charles says Spencer missed a couple of potential big gainers locking in on the first read a couple of times. I said the same thing. It seems like, again, Spencer at times goes through his reads, but at times he gets locked in. Even on the drive where he had a couple really nice throws, they happened to be his first read. At least that was my vantage point from my couch at home.
Yeah, the other one that comes to mind for me, there was the fade route on the goal line. That was the truth of it is Laporta had his guy beat. If Spencer just gives the ball a little more loft and still drops it into the corner of the end zone, Laporta will make that play, I do believe. But that's a ball that Laporta simply couldn't get to. That's a touch throw. It's not easy to make that throw, but obviously I don't know for sure what Laporta could have done better on that particular play than what he did.
James Hemmer says, Petras had a good second quarter. Do you just think he didn't adjust to their adjustments in the second half? I didn't think he played poorly. And let's pump the brakes a little bit. Spencer only threw for a little over 100 yards. He was not – he had one really nice drive. What are your thoughts on this comment from James, Don?
Of course, he certainly had different productivity in the second quarter than the first. And without knowing what the numbers were, we didn't ask him to do a whole lot in the third quarter. That's when we had the scoop and score, as I recall. That's when we had another turnover that it produced a field goal. So I thought, based on our play calling, he executed okay in the third quarter also. I didn't think he certainly didn't go back to the play he had in the first quarter. In the first quarter, he looked rushed at times. He threw the ball too hard a couple of times on short throws. The timing on one drive route to Goodson was not good. Goodson didn't expect the ball so quickly and never really saw it. But I thought that Spencer, if you eliminate the first quarter, I thought you'd have to give him a good grade on the second, third, and fourth quarters. He definitely improved his game from a week ago. It was good to see, in large part because it was a hostile environment. And to do it in Kinnick when you got the support of your fans is one thing. To do it on the road, to me, is a bigger accomplishment.